Is vulnerable to being pinned when life plays hardball, whether it is a physical or mental health condition. No one can stand alone. For those who are not pinned, appreciate that it could be you or loved one someday. So when you see a chance to help someone, please do. They are not weak, they are pinned. Even a slight hand up and a listening ear can begin seriously lightening the load, change, or save a life. Help end stigma. Move from being pinned to purpose. Time for a hand up.
Hello, everyone. It's Jeff Moore. I'm the founder of the Pin to Purpose podcast, and it's a great pleasure for me today to welcome Brian Mann, who's the co-founder of Kemble Mann, who's become a friend, and we are also both fellow ambassadors with the Real Mental Health Foundation. So it's great to have you here, Brian. In a moment, I will say a few words about his bio and then pass it over to Brian for some intro words. But just to remind people who may not have seen the podcast before, the reason I created this is to help shatter stigma, to have conversations about mental health and well-being, and to give people a hand up on their healing journeys by hearing great people like Brian and others talk about their work, their lived experiences, their focus on mental health and well-being and helping people out. So before I pass it over to you, Brian, I'm just going to read a quick bio. So Brian Mann co-founded Kemble Mann, a creative intelligence marketing lab to help healthcare and mental health brands. 20 years as a marketer, he is now making his clients even more dangerous by giving them the ability to create their own marketing materials in minutes, not months. He also runs Glitch States, a weekly newsletter and art movement working to rebrand mental illness as shared human glitches. So very exciting to have you here, Brian. I've seen some of your work and I've always been super impressed. And I'd like to just pass it over to you if you want to say a few more introductory words for our listeners about yourself.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, Jeff. Thanks for having me on the show. Been watching it for a while now, of course, as we know. But yeah, I think mental health, what you're trying to do here to break the stigma, there's a lot of different companies, a lot of different people out there trying to do it. I particularly enjoy the way that you do it with your metaphor. And it was the same with Glitch States, right? We're trying to talk to people in ways that get you to shout versus whisper, I think. And, this we talked about a lot. In any room that you go into, you could say something like, have you broken a bone? Absolutely. Hands go up. Who here is mentally ill? Those words, that's what we're talking about, right? Nothing wrong with it, but the way we approach it, I think sometimes puts people into the whisper mode and a little hesitant to talk about it. But that's why we're here today, right? Like to talk in public about that whisper.
Absolutely.
Doesn't have to be.
No, that's great. And, I love what you're doing with Glitch States, and we're going to have a lot of opportunity in this podcast to talk about it. And I think something super important for viewers is, with what you're doing, with what I'm doing, we're both trying to contribute kind of pieces of the puzzle and knowing that these are other reference points for people, right? It's whatever will help somebody and make them realize, our common humanity, that we are all, as, I would say, like nobody is weak in terms of when they have a mental health challenge or a mental health condition, but they can be in a weakened state. And that's the core of the metaphor I have. And you'll explain more about Glitch States. But the thing is, there's not one way to do this. Like everybody contributing to the extent it can be grabbed onto and helpful to people. That's what it's all about. So.
No, exactly. And I love, again, your metaphor with the bar and the lifting was so easy when you told me that, like, a year or so ago now. Going, yeah, I get that. Like I could be lifting weights. It could be 5 pounds, 10 pounds, whatever. And that you're going to hit that point where you can't lift anymore, right? If anyone's ever been to the gym or just lifting anything around the house, you can't do that all day long. And when that happens, you don't go to yourself like, oh, I'm so terrible, right? Like you expect it. And that's what's so interesting about your metaphor is that people, I think, can relate to it. You can go, oh yeah, that's normal. That's natural. Of course, when that happens, if I get pinned, I'm going to ask for help. Right? I'm not going to just lay there or naturally you'll scream out for help. So again, right, there's these moments in life where we ask for help, we're okay with it. But when it comes to our minds and how we think, for whatever reason, it's been a hush kind of situation. So again, I love that you have that, with the lifting. And it was the same thing with Glitch States.
Yeah, no, thank you. So maybe share with our viewers and listeners here a bit about your journey. Any comments you want to make on, why is mental health and mental illness an important issue for you to be involved in, and whatever you'd like to say.
Absolutely. So, for years in my career, I've been in pharmaceutical, healthcare, marketing, advertising, right? We've always gotten these briefs across our desk of, hey, we have to drive awareness for this disease or to help people with this, right? And we've done it. But me and my business partner, John Kemble, one day we were just talking about it, as humans, mental health came up. We have, things that we've seen, things personally we've experienced. And we looked at each other and said, it's really difficult to talk about mental health, again, mental illness. These words, I'm a writer by trade, right? So words to me have a lot of weight to it. And, I got paid my whole career, luckily enough, to think about words and how do you say this or how do you say that? So we were having this good conversation and, we both have kids of different ages. And we said, love to talk about our kids, about mental health, mental illness. But how do we do that? Right? You have a 5-year-old, a 9-year-old, a 20-year-old, all different ages. But it just didn't sit right with us to sit down and go, let's talk about your mental health, to say a 5-year-old and be like, what are you talking about? So that's where it kind of came up. We were playing with AI at the time, as most people are. It's a hot topic today. We saw people being created with 6 fingers, 12 fingers, and these glitches, right, that were happening. So anyway, this kind of mix of that talk and the glitches came together in a real creative way, right, where things just kind of collide and go, huh, like what about if we called it glitches to our kids, right? Like, hey, again, nothing against the glitch, but if you're thinking or feeling a certain way, and you feel like you don't want to feel that way, or you feel like you need some help, how do you talk about that, right? So we sat down, we did an experiment and said, all right, so just like, your computer or your phone or your tablet, whatever device as a kid, right, you kind of on or experience, what happens when that glitches or doesn't go the way you want, right? It's like, oh, well, Dad, I come right to you. Like, hey, help, right? Like this thing is stuck.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And, we can reboot it. We can go to the Apple store or wherever you're going, right, to get help. But we address it. We don't hide that. We don't whisper about it. Like, oh no, your cell phone's broken, right? It's a funny kind of metaphor. So they got that right away. And then we said, well, same thing with your thinking and your brain or how you feel. Sometimes that you're in a state that you might not like, right? Nothing wrong with that. We all have, whether it's sadness or you're worried about something, you don't like that feeling, but it's an important feeling, right? It's trying to tell you something. So that's where we kind of came up with this idea of you're in a glitched state right now, which kind of gave it this hopefulness to it, right? Of like, all right, maybe there's something I can do about that, right? You're not broken. You're not, over here when we're over there. And I feel like a lot of times in mental health, especially just growing up, in the 90s and stuff, right? The way people talk about things, some of the language was harsh, right? This person's crazy. They're nuts. They're whatever. These words are thrown out there. And it just creates the divide of I'm here and other people are here, right? And these lines don't cross. So anyway, that's what the glitch states was about, to go, no, just like computers, we can all glitch. And there's nothing.
Yeah, right. Sure. At almost any time, right? Which is interesting. And I think, you tell me, but I think there's parallels too with the, in terms of pin to purpose and glitch states. Like, ideally individuals, we're all responsible for ourselves to, we try our best to stay healthy and deal with things. Let's say the barbell, if you don't get pinned, you can walk away type of thing, right? And ideally you don't get pinned. The glitch state, sometimes people can fix it themselves or it comes back.
Right.
But when it gets tough, that's when there shouldn't be the shame, or nobody has the right to tell anyone, that you're weak, or that they stigmatize them, when that person doesn't recognize that they're just as vulnerable as anyone else to end up in a very difficult situation, depending on what happens in life.
Exactly. Yeah. And that is so true. Like, again, with the bar, with the glitch, it allows you to talk about it and go, oh yeah, I've been there before, or I can see how I could get there, right? Again, not thinking this is some other thing that happens to other people. It's like, no, it's a human experience.
Yes.
You get sad, you get worried, these feelings, but when it becomes a clinical diagnosis or technicality, right? I think that's when people start to get a little antsy about it, right? Like these big words that come out, the disorders, or even the word depression itself just has, a heavy feel to it
Yep.
today. So that was part of what we were trying to do too, Jeff, right? To give the world new language and new visuals of how we naturally feel as humans. And that to us was really important as marketers, as creative people, looking at the world and the time we have left in it to go, how can we make a difference? How can we contribute? Just the same thing you're doing.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. I've seen some examples of what you've done in terms of actually, I don't know if you call them portraits or how you can describe it for the viewers, but maybe you can tell people about that creative process. I mean, I saw a really interesting one of Sean Lesser, the founder of The Reel, that we're both ambassadors in. And for people, I mean, this is what they call the male volunteers that are doing great work around the world. But maybe you can share a bit, and maybe people can see some examples on your website or through contacting you. But tell us a bit about how that actually creative process works to create. Is it called a portrait or something else?
It's a portrait. No, absolutely. It's a portrait. And we wanted to do that, like, Renaissance portraits or throughout the ages, right? There's different things that people would illustrate or highlight or celebrate even as a portrait. And we thought about that and go, what about your glitch, right? Whether it's anxiety or stress or money worries, whatever it is, what if we made a portrait about that to celebrate it? Because you're living with it. You've gone through some stuff. There are things to go, as a human, the resilience you have, the ability to ask for help, whatever it is, right? So portrait is the word for it. And what we started to do was to, we have an Instagram page where we post some creative things, but every month we have a different topic. And, 1 month we had OCD, right? Obsessive compulsive disorder. Again, that language is very heavy. Obsessive compulsive disorder. You feel that. But we reached out. We said, hey, if anyone is living with this or experiencing this, reach out to us. And the process is, someone reaches out and goes, hey, I have this. I live with it. I'm happy to talk publicly about it. And we go, great. So we have a half-hour call, me and John Kemble together, very relaxed. We tell the person, whatever you say, we're not going to record it. We're, just go ahead and tell us, how does it feel to live with this? And we have a set of questions, right, where we let them talk about it and then ask things like, all right, well, if that was a color, what color would it be? Or, if it was an animal, what would that be like? Just to try to get them think about metaphorically, how could I represent your OCD to somebody else? Because it's a great example, right? In public media, especially in the US, OCD sometimes is a cute thing, right? To go, oh, I have OCD. I like to organize things. And people will say that, right? Oh, I kind of color code stuff, without giving the full respect to the living with it itself. So we wanted to offer that up and go, all right, we know what we think it is as a public, but what is it really? And as we talk to this person, they're like, okay, well, there's obtrusive thoughts. Sometimes I'll sit there and I think, what if I hurt my dog? What if I just throw something at it right now? Right. And they don't want to think that. They're not trying to think that. They know deep down that they're not going to hurt their dog, but that's popping in their head. Right. Or some other question of what if that email I sent has something terrible in it? I should go check that. Right. So that's part of it too. But the deeper we got into the discussion, we realized this is more than just, the organizing or the obsessive about making things neat. There's a lot of deeper feeling to that. So anyway, long story short, we took that. John goes and creates a portrait. We use the likeness of that person. We do use some AI tools to kind of play with things, mix things together. And we try to represent what it feels like. And we get that person's feedback, right? We don't just put this into the world as our interpretation, but we go, hey, based on that half-hour call, what you said, this is what we think it feels like, what it looks like. So this person, we had an image with a lot of question marks around them, right? Swirling question marks, some kind of fire, some kind of, the question marks were different. And it was really great, Jeff, to reveal this to that person. And they said, oh my God, I can finally show my husband what it feels like. For years, trying to explain it, right? You don't really have the words for these things. As I just explained in the last, minute, it's a lot of stuff to talk through, right? Oh, this thought, this thought, this thought. But to show a picture with a lot of question marks, and then we bring it to life too, like with the swirling, we do some animations, these things coming in and out. They're like, this is incredible because I can show someone and they go, I feel that. I feel that confusion. I feel that overwhelmingness of just question after question. Really, that's what's going on. and you create some kind of bridge, right? Some kind of empathy that allows that anyone else to go, this is what it's like. And then, to talk to somebody else with OCD, completely different portrait, completely different experience with some overlap, of course. But that's what we're trying to do, is to give you a visual and language, and also to talk about it as these things aren't all bad, right? Like sometimes anxiety is another thing that I can talk about that, back in whatever the early ages of being human, that person with anxiety probably saved the tribe because they heard things, right? Or they looked at things. Maybe they didn't want to feel that, right? That this goes back to the glitch of like, I don't enjoy this. I'm kind of anxious a lot, but that served a purpose, right? So is there a superpower to the glitch? That's what we started to realize talking to people. This isn't all clinically bad. This isn't, again, you're here, I'm there.
Right.
It's a human experience that's very nuanced to people. And anyway, it's very exciting to keep digging into this, right? And
no, that's fantastic. And tell us a bit more about your newsletter and how does that work? And people can subscribe and then they can contribute ideas, or tell us how this all works.
Yeah, so every month we try to do a different topic, right? We started out clinically with, anxiety, depression, bipolar, etc. And now we've gotten into things like this month. It's money fear, right? Thinking about a topic globally that people are experiencing, just these fears or feelings. And the newsletter, it comes out once a week. And, we focus on a different aspect of it every month. So we do a couple of different portraits in the newsletter. Sometimes we do some poems that are inspired by people that we talk to, right?
Very nice. And sorry, do you guys write the poems, or where does that come from?
Yeah, so this is all us plus AI. So we feed into our systems we created. Sure. The thoughts from, again, we get permission for this, of course, to say, hey, we're going to do this. But from talking to people, we put it through and we try to go, hey, what would a poem be like experiencing, right? Nonstop questions. So it's summing it up, and we're getting really good responses out of it. People writing back to us going, oh my God, you guys nailed it. Like, that's what I feel. This is it. This little poem is how I felt yesterday. So again, we're getting the feedback, we're tweaking. This isn't just, the AI slop, right? Where we go, hey, make a newsletter and something comes out. We're really guiding it, right? And whatever we look at, we review, we think about deeply. Sometimes we include a message like, hey, if you're experiencing this, dial 988 in the United States, or, please get medical help. Knowing some things could be triggering to people, right? But anyway, so each week we come out with that different topic, different images, different poem. And we also have a glitched friend of the week, right? Because to your point, we're all have these mental health kind of companies or movements, and we want to spotlight each other, because I think that's one of the most important things that we need to talk about, is how do these foundations lift each other up and share, because it's so hard to find, right? When you're in that moment of distress or glitch, you want to get help, but you don't always know where to go.
Right. No, very important. You're also the head of the Real Mental Health Foundation Embassy in Los Angeles. So yes. Maybe you can tell people a bit about what is that all about, and who's involved and what do you guys do?
Yep. So Sean Lesser, as you mentioned, the head of the Real, asked me to kind of lead that, and happy to do that, because I think the story is, especially for men, there's allies in the group who are females also, but focused on men's mental health. It's hard to find people you can talk to, right? You have your work friends, you have people that but generally it's tough to find a friend, especially as you get older. So Sean kind of asked, like, hey, you're in LA. Can you host a walk once a month, right? Real simple, once a month. And it could be anything you want. And, there's guys like yourself, right, doing walks around the country. You're in Canada, people across the globe, and we're all going out that third Saturday to simply walk. And, at first you kind of think about that as a leader, right, of the LA. I'm like, what should I do? Should I have a topic? Should I have a list, right? You overthink it a little bit. But I said, you know what? I'm just going to message these people and say, hey, if you're in the LA area, I'm going for a walk. Try to make it fun, right? It's like the first one, I think, we're going to Venice Beach. We're going to walk up to Muscle Beach, where Arnold used to lift, which is very close to your metaphor, right? And just say, we're just going to walk. So, I showed up there not knowing what to expect, and, kind of, you'll see if people show up, but had a bunch of guys show up. Nobody knew each other, right? They're just kind of like, hey, nice to meet you. What are we really doing? And I told them, I said, well, we're just going to walk. We're just going to walk up here and come back and, see what happens. But naturally, Jeff, as you probably experienced, Guys start talking, talk about what you do or whatever's going on. And then it never fails. Each walk I have, somebody goes, "This is the real, right?" It's like, yeah, it's the real mental health foundation. Go, okay. Well, can I tell you something kind of heavy, right? They kind of count. It's almost like an apology. Yeah. Like, am I allowed to say this? Because I wouldn't say
absolutely.
It to my buddy, right? Yeah,
absolutely.
Absolutely. And then, I won't divulge anything, but things come out. Family matters, work matters, stresses, worries. And again, it doesn't even have to be like, I've just got diagnosed with depression. It's not that. Sure, it could be part of it, but really just whatever's on your mind. And then surprisingly so, again, a bunch of guys go, "Me too," right? Or "I've had that," or "I know that." And you're like, "Oh my God," because I thought it was just me. And I didn't want to tell anyone about it because I thought you'd think I was weak or whatever, right? All the things you think about. And so it's a really wonderful walk where, within a half hour to an hour, you're out, you're looking at stuff, you're laughing, maybe you get lunch after, maybe you don't. But I think it gives guys that room to naturally talk, let it open up. And again, not in a clinical way, not in a forced way. And I've had guys who showed up for, weeks that don't say much. And then, six months in, then they drop the bomb. But they all have it. We all have something that we're about to drop, right. Which is great.
Yeah, that's great. Now, you and John at Kemble and Mann have a creative intelligence marketing lab, and yes. You do help healthcare and mental health brands. So I was wondering in particular if you could talk about mental health brands, maybe some examples, whether you name them or not is fine, but just talk about some of that work in helping mental health brands. And I think this is particularly interesting. Like I'm interested because, as we're saying, like, glitch states, pin to purpose, the metaphor, we're trying to bring out things of meaning and connection and will inspire people. And when it's a brand, obviously, then you have a service or a product and that you're hoping will resonate with your audience, with your potential clients, your clients. So can you share just a story or two about, your creative intelligence marketing lab, especially for mental health brands?
No, absolutely. So we have a really interesting one right now that we're working on. And again, this is all through connections and people, right? So if anyone knows anyone, happy to talk and just see where it goes. But this guy has a show on PBS called How Are We Today? Right?
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and it's tied to mental health. And the way it was described to me through a friend, who introduced me to him was like, hey, it's kind of like Mr. Rogers meets Sesame Street, back again, growing up in the 90s, right? I'm like, yeah, I used to watch those shows. I love that stuff. It was, think about Mr. Rogers, this person talking to you saying, are you angry? How do you deal with that, right? Like that was some big stuff back then. So anyway, he is doing a show called How Are We Today? And, it's a sitcom. It was on for season 1. They're looking for funding for season 2, which is where we come in, right? To market and get some more attention, etc. And every episode, kind of how Glitch States does each month, it follows a different mental health topic. So one month it is social anxiety, right? It was October. Social anxiety was the theme of that show. And, not to give away the whole story, but basically there's a neighbor down the hallway. It's Halloween and they know they live there, but they just haven't seen them in weeks, right? They haven't come out of the apartment. And, if you lived in New York or anywhere, you see people. You kind of keep track of where they go. So it's noticeable. Like apartment 2B, no one's ever come out of there. And long story short, they finally meet her. She has social anxiety. It came about during COVID and surprised her, right? And it's a very natural discussion where it's not a diagnosis. It's not going to the hospital, but you're talking to a neighbor. You may have noticed something a little, again, the glitch, right? Of like, something, I don't know, concerned here. I just want to talk to you. Is everything okay? And then on the show, they bring in a clinical psychologist who's also part of the cast, right? It's not said as like, oh, we're going to the psychologist. But they give you some tips and tricks. So imagine that watching this as, I think the audience is like 12 plus, right? So maybe you're watching it with your kid, maybe you're, a teenager and you stumble upon this, but to give the words to them of, hey, you may have social anxiety. Okay, now what? Here's some tips. Here's some tricks. Here's people you can talk to.
Amazing.
Right? A lot of people have this. And you start to feel like, oh, okay, that's a relief. Because again, I'm sitting here thinking I was, one of a kind. It's like, yeah. Many of a kind. So anyway, That's his show in a nutshell. And they're looking for funding and stuff like
Wow.
that. And of course, it's PBS, so we're not
Yeah.
talking about people that have billions of dollars to
Sure.
funnel. But basically, our systems that we created to tie back to what we can offer them is, if you want to do social media posts, if you want to send out emails, if you want to do, PowerPoint decks to investors, right? You have to do these pitch decks to go, hey, we need some funding. That takes a lot of time, a lot of work. A traditional kind of marketing firm, a lot of people designing, right? Nothing wrong with that. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. But with our systems, we're able to design them so that this guy who runs the show, he can press a button and be like, make me a social post for Wednesday about X, and you get the image, you get the caption, you get the hashtags, all kind of vetted. So what me and John did sounds wild, is we kind of uploaded our consciousness into this thing of how to be a good creative director, right? How do you get through to an audience? How do you write a pitch deck that sells and doesn't make someone fall asleep or walk out of the room? And all that's baked in, so people can simply say, hey, make it for me, and it comes out. So that's kind of what we're offering them. Because again, imagine you got to raise money for a show. You got to make a lot of noise about that, right? You got to have a lot of posts. You got to have a lot of emails. You got to contact people. And you want to do that, especially, for us, this is important, near and dear to our hearts, right? We want them to succeed without charging so much money that they can't do it anymore. Right. And that's business. You're weighing both things.
Yeah.
But that's where we're excited to give people the ability to go, you have 3 emails that you need to send that are very important. Send them, make them. Don't decide which one you can afford. Right. Like, let's get that out there.
Absolutely.
So in the mental health space, Jeff, this is where we're excited to work with people to go, all right, you got a great message. We believe in it. Let's get it out there. We don't have to do it the old way of so much time and money anymore.
No, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to ask you about stigma and what your thoughts are on that. And do you think that stigma is going down in society? And I know that's a massive question because it may depend where you are and sometimes your culture and history and all of this. But what would you like to share a few thoughts on stigma and how how it's being overcome? I mean, again, your efforts, mine, countless other people and organizations, but still societal habits and norms and cultural and other reasons why people just keep just a very rigid view on that. So just wondering what thoughts you have on how that's lowering stigma, shattering stigma is evolving.
Yeah, no, I think it definitely is, because again, from my own personal experience and in the workplace, things like that, I can recall just friends and people and talking to people. Again, mental health is very quiet. Like I said, it was a whisper. It was a side conversation. I think now, thanks to a lot of people, whether it's celebrities, whether it's people like yourself talking about it, right? Even The Real, to see a group of men talking about this in a way that you go, all right, well, they don't look weak to me. I'm not making fun of them. I don't feel like I wouldn't hire this guy, right? All the stuff that's the worries in your head of, if I say I have anxiety, will I not have a job, right? Will I lose my friends? Will whatever, right? It goes through your head. So I think the more and more people speak about it, the less the stigma becomes, but it absolutely is still there. And I think it might be for a little more time, because there is some reality to that, right? You might have seen a bad case, or maybe you've judged someone yourself personally, and said, hey, I don't know about this. But again, thinking about it as the human glitch, as the weight that gets stuck on everyone, I think that's when it tips over. And once you go over, you really can't go back, in a good way, to go, you know what, I get this now. Like, oh my goodness, this can happen to any of us. It can happen to me. There's also ways that I can help. And I think that's important too, right? Where in the past, it kind of felt like, all right, this person has a mental condition, mental issue. There's nothing we can do, right? Like, they're just over there. But that's not true. And I think whether it's very severe or not, there's a lot of things we can do. And that's why we say in the glitch, even a conversation can help, even just asking a question, texting a friend, which is incredible, because again, the loneliness epidemic, whatever you want to say, the things in the world happening, those little tiny actions chips away at the stigma every day. So I think we all have to keep going. I think we all have to keep the effort up. I don't think there's going to be a point where we go, oh, stigma's gone, right? I think it could come back, honestly, not to be scary about it, but it's a way as a culture how we think about things. And we've seen that over time too, right? Things that become acceptable that weren't in the past, things that future generations or our grandkids, right, would be like, "Are you kidding me? You were worried about that?" Like, it's going to seem funny. But again, I think as long as we keep promoting it, just like the Mr. Rogers thing, right? He was there for our generation. That's why I'm so passionate about it. To be like, how are we today? I would love to have a show into the world that my kids could watch naturally, or just find, or even myself to watch that. So I think, again, it really comes down to talking about it, saying it out loud, acknowledging it, recognizing it. And then again, right, if you're a boss in business, in industry, in the world, if you're an employee, talking to that friend, it's just about having some of that compassion as humans, right? Last thing I'll say, like, for that, right, if someone has a headache, you get that, right? You don't badger them. You're like, oh, why do you have a headache? You shouldn't have a headache. I never had a headache, whatever. It's like, oh my God, I know how that feels. Please go take care of yourself. Or I have some Tylenol. Like, I can help you too.
Yeah.
So it would be great if we get to that level of things where it's like mental health condition, glitch state. How can I help, Jeff?
Exactly.
I actually have it.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
No, I was hearing another real ambassador recently and agree completely. There's a couple of sides to this. We are promoting people to, accept a hand up and speak about their issues with, loved ones, etc. However, it's not just that, because depending on how far you are, then it is absolutely up to us to be reaching out and to ask how you are. And if you have any concerns, or just, it's a two-way street, because sometimes when you are in that glitch state, you're almost beyond asking, or you feel like so confused. And just like when you're pinned, it's like, that's when sometimes other people, certainly before that too, have to be, we have to show our concern as a community and as friends, and as, and ask people how they're doing, exactly as you're saying. It's got to be that two-way street, And I think I was talking to somebody else recently on the podcast who had, open heart surgery, and also, has had other challenges to do with mental health. And, but we were speaking about, like, if in sports, if somebody, a very well-conditioned, strong athlete breaks their leg on the field, you're going to take them off. They're out of the game for a while. There's, they're not weak, but they are in a weakened state, right? They're just, you're out of there. So if you're in a glitch state, or if you're pinned, I mean, it's not your optimal self. It's like you need some help, and nobody's. It's like your other points. Nobody's going to complain about certain physical health issues, but it's intrinsic for all of us. Mental health is probably the most important thing in terms of how you can enjoy life and process and connect with people. And I find it interesting and ironic, and something to delve into a bit too, because I know it in my own experience, and I see this and talking to people. But the tough thing is when somebody is trying to recover or deal with something, they're kind of on lower vibrations. They're not as optimal as person as they really are. So when they're trying to get back with a good job, or rebuild a relationship, or do certain things, they're not bringing their true self to the table necessarily at that time. And in that weakened state, it's harder for them to rise up to where they were, or rebuild things. And so that's another area of, like, support is helpful, and encouragement is helpful, and knowing that people are there to listen, as people are in the real and great, communities, etc. So it's just observations, right?
It's true. And I think what you said really resonated with me, of that accepting the hand up, right? Accepting the help, because that's the other part of this. It's easy to talk about and say, okay, people have mental health conditions. I get that. But when it comes to yourself personally, right, to your point of, like, the ego involved, and what you said, it's like having a cold, right? I can't sing the way I used to. I can't really eat what I'm used to eating, right? I'm a changed person right now. To recognize that and accept the help is really difficult. But I think it goes back on again, all of us as humans in our neighborhoods, thinking small, right? Thinking the person down the block, thinking the person you see at school or whatever, to just ask those questions, to say, like, how are we today? How are you doing today? And then don't stop there, right? Because we know, at least in the US, you're going to get that surface answer. I'm great. Everything's fine. good. Right. And say, okay, but really, like, what's going on in your life today? Just ask that second question, right? At one, it could lead to a very interesting conversation, whether it's mental health or not, right? To just get to know people a little deeper than we do. But two, it could reveal something where you could help, right? You have a lot of skills. You have a lot of ideas. You might be able to inspire that person to seek professional help or to just lighten their day for what it is. But I think back to, like, even CPR or somebody choking, right? At some point in our lives, whether you have a kid or whatever, like, you go to a CPR class, you get trained on that because you want to help, because you recognize, again, right? This is all very similar stuff. Anyone can choke, and getting help it's calling 911 might not be the best thing. You might not have enough time to wait for that, right? So I think it's recognizing as humans the power that we truly have to help each other, right? It's incredible when you think about that, and just taking it upon yourself. Again, CPR is complicated. I get that. You remember some steps. You got to do a class, but mental health, not so much. It's how are you, Jeff? No, really, how are you? And just sit with that, right? Just sit there. Like I said in the walks, it comes out. It will come out.
Yeah. And that gets you on the road, right? Because as you say, if you're not well and you say that, then there may be a very painful healing journey. It could be very long and full of bumps. And different people on the podcast who have worked through addictions or deal with addictions, and those are things that can come back. Obviously, like, it's never over necessarily, So I wanted to ask you maybe if there's anything that you're excited about, that's coming up or different. You've worked with different clients, all sorts of different clients. You've got the newsletter, you've got Glitch States. I mean, in terms of, as you continue to help brands and help people and stuff like that, what are the type of things that you're excited about coming up or in the future in the mental health space for your work?
Yeah, no, I think I'm excited to see more of these kind of, in-person get-togethers, like Sean with The Real. I know he has conventions and meetings. Even just recently, his Hats and Chats tour. The fact that, like, he came out to San Francisco and down to LA. I think it's so important to have these moments. Whether you organize it in your community yourself, again, right? Just stepping up, having a block party or whatever it is, getting people out together talking. Is so important. And I think too, again, what I'm seeing in the business of people being a little more brave, in today's world, and saying, hey, you know what? Just recognize it, right? Like, no one's coming to save us. And not to be down about that, but it's like, there's no thing that's going to come and change all this. It really comes back to us as people in the community. So to see people step up, right? To see this guy with a PBS TV show that, from LA, and he's putting his passion into this and making that happen. That's exciting to me, right?
Yeah,
and as
absolutely.
a company, right? As a company, as Kemble Mann, those are the people I want to work with. And I told him, I said, I would love to make this happen, right? This isn't even about money at this point, right? Which we all know money's an important part of business, exactly. But like, it's not even about that. It's like, if we can get funding for this second show, if this show takes off, if this helps people with mental health the way Sesame Street taught kids the alphabet, low-income children, middle-income people, whatever it is, if we can do that with this show, that to me is satisfying. That's why I'm here. That's what I'm using my talents and skills for, right? So I think, again, the people that are brave enough to step up, to make something, to take control of this and say, you know what? I'm the one here to save it. I'm the one here to do something, right? And that gives that person so much power. And I think it inspires down the line. It trickles out. It makes me want to do more, right? Like, I have a newsletter. I have this. You just want to help. So again, I think in life, people need missions. People need a purpose. This Pinned to Purpose. We're on this podcast.
That's why it's on the title. It's just not telling anybody what their purpose is. That's up to them. But certainly when they're in a tough place, you can help them to find that, or invite them into something, as they kind of realize how much they're loved and how much they're needed and how much they contribute to a cause. and then they get their feedback, and then, they can get back to thinking more about what they really care about or cared about. And I think that's exactly what the name's supposed to be. The two is can't do it alone. You need to have somebody else, and helping you out, and purpose is exactly that. So I agree with you 1,000%.
Yeah, it's just so important, because I think that's what I've seen across the board. When you don't have that purpose, and again, it's hard to find, right? It's hard to understand, but it doesn't have to be a grand purpose either, right? It doesn't have to be like I'm here to build this amazing empire. No, it's your purpose is again to ask 3 people today, how are you doing, and that's it. And sometimes
absolutely
you see it in films, you see it kind of in books sometimes, right? But I think it's those little moments where, as a human, you don't recognize the impact you have on other people's lives, right? It goes the opposite way too, right? If you're negative, or if you're sharing something, or if you make fun of something, like that's another thing. That's a different avenue where it goes bad. But to make things go good is really exciting. And I would challenge people listening to this, right, to take that upon yourself and say, wake up. How can I make someone else's day a little bit better? Or how can I interact with someone that maybe I just didn't notice, right? There's people in a building that like, oh, wow, you live here too. How long have you had that dog, right? Whatever it is, just take that challenge and see where it leads. And then again, I've heard amazing stories, Jeff, of people saying stuff like that, right? It's like, oh, I said hi to someone, and 6 months later, they told me, that got them out of the house and blah, 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 blah. Just from that little nugget of human interaction, because we're craving it. We're all craving it.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you said, there is a problem of loneliness and isolation in many communities. Especially, people who are retired and, may have lost their partner, don't have their workplace to go back to. And, it's interesting in terms of their identity and self-identity and all of this. And yet, they're probably wiser than almost everybody else, because they've lived more things, or they certainly have a lot to contribute. So, as one example, right? So it's I'm wondering if there's other topics that we haven't really covered, or stories that you'd like to share with people, anything in particular. And we're gonna obviously put your website on the YouTube channel, and we're putting this on Spotify, so people can reach out to you and John directly.
Absolutely.
They've heard some of what you do, and they can tell you what their challenges are in terms of how you might be able to help them with their brands, and with your newsletter, glitch states, portraits, etc. But are there other things that we haven't really covered that you wanted to bring up today? Because happy to keep going if you'd like. So
no, I think the last thing for me personally, like just to share my kind of insights, and we're all different, as you said, we all have different kind of reactions to things. But what helped me so much in my life, just mental health wise, right? Running was one thing, and not that running's for everyone, but some kind of movement, some kind of exercise. I realized, I was adverse to it for a long time, just like, I'm not a runner, I don't run, whatever. I finally got into it, and I was like, this really clears my head. This really, helps me just go out into nature, be in the moment kind of thing. And when I come back from a run, I just feel so much better. So I just wanted to share that with people watching, whether it's a walk, whether it's lifting some weights, whatever it is, maybe give that a shot, right? Experiment with different things. If you're feeling in that glitch state, ways to get out of it, right? And then the last thing, I was very lucky, around 13 years old, living in New York City, watching public television late at night, right? Because I'm just flipping around like, what's on? I found this kind of, Zen monk. You see the Buddha statue behind me there. And that was a big moment in my life where, you're young, you're growing up, you're angry about things, kind of typical, teenage years. And, he's talking, it's in Chinese, it's in subtitles. And I'm just like, what is this? But he's talking about the situation where, today it's raining. Okay. And you go outside, you don't have an umbrella, or you forgot your umbrella, and you get mad because you're getting wet, right? You're just very angry. It's raining. Why is this happening to me? Right? You could identify with that. It's like, yeah, I hate it when it rains. I hate that. Right? It's like, okay. Now, next day, you go to a water park and you pay to have the same water fall upon you with no umbrella, and you're happy. You're excited, right? And that just blew my mind. For whatever reason, personally, that shook me out of like whatever it was, and go, oh my God, it really is, how I'm experiencing the world, how I think about things, how I react to things. And I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying, like, oh, if I just did this, I'd be happy. But it gave me insights into my mind to go, wow, it's complex in there, right? I'm not just living and experiencing. I'm putting my thoughts on things, my perspectives, and that just kind of opened it up for me to be like, how do other people think? How do other people experience? Like, is this a bad moment, or is this a moment I just don't like, right? And help me put things into perspective. I followed him for years until he passed away. And it's funny, Jeff, he still pops up like on my Instagram page and quotes and things like that. I think in life, I believe in that. You get signs, you get kind of directional stuff if you're open to it.
Yeah.
But that to me is another huge thing. So running and kind of Zen philosophy, or, meditation, if you will, just giving yourself the space to be in here. I think that's what's so important, right? Because you feel it, you react to it. But to take a moment and go, what is happening in here? Whereas, you get, I'm hungry here. This is moving fast, whatever. You're very in touch with your body in all other places. But I think the mind is someplace, if, again, the viewers and listeners can take 5 minutes and explore that of like, how do I feel in there? That's really, the best advice I could give, or, thoughts. Again, personal, how it helped me.
Fantastic. Well, thanks so much, Brian. It's been a great pleasure as always to chat with you, and I'm happy you could share all these stories and talk about Kemble Mann. And I hope listeners who are interested will reach out to you guys, and it's always great, like I said, to chat with you. So thanks again. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Jeff.
Take care.